At my son-in-law's birthday dinner, he pointed at me and said, "The mother-in-law no one wants around." I stayed silent and froze the loan he was using under my late husband's name. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." I was never one to make a scene. At 68, I had learned that dignity often lies in silence, but some silences can suffocate you. The restaurant buzzed, with chatter as I smoothed down my navy blue dress, the one I'd bought specially for Ian's birthday dinner. My daughter Amelia had insisted I come. "It'll be good for everyone, Mom. The whole family together." Family. The word used to bring me comfort. Now it felt like a knot in my chest. I arrived exactly on time, clutching a small wrapped package. Ian had always been particular about punctuality, one of his few qualities I actually appreciated. The hostess led me to a private dining area where voices and laughter spilled out. The moment I stepped inside, the laughter dimmed. Amelia rushed over, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Mom, you made it." She hugged me quickly, the scent of her perfume, something expensive Ian had bought her, lingering between us. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, meaning it. Despite everything, I still showed up. Always. Ian sat at the head of the table looking every bit the successful businessman in his tailored suit. My son-in-law of 12 years had aged well, his dark hair now streaked with distinguished silver at the temples. He acknowledged me with a slight nod. "Christine," he said, my name sounding foreign on his tongue. "You found the place all right?" As if I hadn't been coming to this restaurant since before he was born. As if I hadn't celebrated my 40th anniversary. With James here, before cancer took him from me. "I managed," I said simply, taking the only empty seat, furthest from both Ian and Amelia. Dinner progressed with forced pleasantries. I focused on my grandchildren, asking about school and activities while ignoring the subtle eye rolls from Ian whenever I spoke. By the time dessert arrived, an elaborate cake with "Happy 45th Birthday, Ian" written in perfect script, I was emotionally exhausted. Then came the toasts. Amelia went first, gushing about her incredible husband. Friends followed with stories of Ian's business prowess and generosity. When everyone had spoken, Ian stood up, champagne flute in hand. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, his voice smooth with practiced charm. "Family means everything to me." His gaze traveled around the table, landing briefly on each person before settling on me. Something in his eyes hardened. "And I'd like to make a special toast," he continued, lips curving into what others might mistake for a smile. "To Christine, the mother-in-law nobody wants around." The silence that followed was deafening. Someone coughed. A fork clattered against a plate. I sat frozen, the words slicing through me like shards of glass. "Come on, it's just a joke." Ian laughed, breaking the tension. "Christine knows I'm kidding. Right, Christine?" All eyes turned to me. 20 pairs of eyes waiting to see how the old woman would react to being publicly humiliated. I lifted my water glass, took a small sip, and set it down carefully. "Happy birthday, Ian," I said quietly. The conversation resumed, flowing around me like I was a stone in a stream. No one mentioned the toast again. No one defended me, not even Amelia, who kept her eyes fixed on her plate. Later that night, in the silence of my empty house, I sat at James's old desk. I'd been going through his papers for months since his passing, organizing his affairs. That's when I found it. Documentation of a business loan in James's name that was still active, a loan being used by Ian's consulting firm. My hands trembled as I read the details. Ian had convinced James to co-sign years ago, but the loan had been extended after James's death. My husband's good name was still being used by the man who had humiliated me hours earlier. Without hesitation, I picked up the phone and called the bank. As James's executor and the co-signer of all his accounts, I had the authority. "I'd like to cancel the loan extension for Meridian Consulting," I said, my voice steadier than it had been all evening. When the bank officer asked if I was sure, I thought of Ian's smirking face, of Amelia's downcast eyes, of the words that still rang in my ears. "Yes," I said. "I'm absolutely certain." I hung up the phone and stared out the window into the darkness. For the first time since James died, I felt something other than grief. Something that almost felt like power. But as my phone began to light, up with Amelia's name, I knew the real storm was just beginning. The first call came at 6:17 the next morning. "What have you done?" Amelia's voice crackled through the phone, raw with anger. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "Amelia?" "Ian just got a call from the bank. They're pulling his financing, the financing Dad helped him secure." "How could you do this?" I pressed my fingers against my temple. "I think we should talk about this in person." "No. Tell me right now. Did you cancel Dad's loan guarantee?" The rage in her voice was something I'd rarely heard directed at me. I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "Yes," I said simply. "Why? Because of some stupid toast?" "He was joking, Mom." My daughter had always been quick to defend Ian, even when his jokes cut too deep. It started not long after they married, when he'd make subtle comments about my cooking or my appearance. "Just teasing," Amelia would say. "Don't be so sensitive." "This isn't about the toast," I lied. "It's about proper financial management of your father's estate." "Bullshit," she spat. "This is you being petty and vindictive. You've never liked Ian." The truth was, I had liked Ian once. When Amelia first brought him home 15 years ago, I'd seen his charm and ambition as positive traits. James had reservations. "Something's off about him," he'd whispered to me. But I'd dismissed them as overprotectiveness. How I wish I'd listened. "Amelia, there are things you don't know," I started carefully. "No, Mom, there are things you don't know. That loan was keeping Ian's business afloat while he closes a major deal. You've just sabotaged everything he's worked for." I thought about telling her then, about the discrepancies I'd found in the loan paperwork, about the rumors of Ian's gambling debts, about the way he'd manipulated James into co-signing in the first place. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry you feel that way." "You're sorry? That's it?" She paused, her breathing heavy. "Ian was right about you all along. You've always been jealous of our success, of our happiness." The accusation stung worse than Ian's toast. "That's not true. Fix this," she demanded. "Call the bank and reinstate the loan." "I can't do that, Amelia." "Then don't expect to hear from us again." The line went dead. I placed the phone down slowly, feeling every one of my 68 years. The room suddenly seemed too large, too quiet. I pulled my robe tighter around me and made my way downstairs to the kitchen. As I mechanically prepared my morning tea, memories flooded back, warning signs I'd ignored for years. 3 Christmases ago, when Ian had borrowed money from James for what he called a temporary cash flow issue. How defensive he'd become when James asked for details. 2 years ago, when I overheard him on the phone, voice hushed, promising someone he'd have the money soon. Last Thanksgiving, when he'd cornered me in the kitchen, asking if James had left significant investments that I might consider putting into his business ventures. The kettle whistled, pulling me from my thoughts. I poured the water into my cup, watching the tea slowly stain it amber. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. "Ian says there's still time to fix this mistake. Don't make me choose between you and my husband." But she'd already chosen, long ago. She just couldn't see it. The doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I saw Ian standing on my porch, his expression a carefully crafted mask of concern. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Christine," he said, voice gentle, like he was speaking to a confused child. "We need to talk about what happened." "There's nothing to discuss," I replied. His facade cracked slightly. "I think there is. You've put my business in jeopardy over a harmless joke." "Was it harmless, Ian? Really?" "Come on, Christine. Everyone jokes about their in-laws. It's practically tradition." I thought about all the jokes over the years, each one chipping away at my place in my daughter's life. The way he'd criticize my advice to Amelia. The way he'd forget to invite me to important events. The way he'd interrupt or talk over me. "This isn't about the toast," I said again, this time meaning it. "It's about the loan that should have been closed when James died. It's about you using my husband's good name without permission." Ian's expression hardened. James understood business. He knew investments sometimes need time to mature. He wouldn't have pulled the rug out from under me like this. "James also believed in honesty," I countered. "Something you seem to have a problem with." A dangerous look flashed across his face, so quickly I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching carefully. "Be careful, Christine," he said softly. "Amelia values family harmony. It would be a shame if she had to distance herself from such negativity." The threat hung in the air between us. "Goodbye, Ian," I said, closing the door firmly. As his expensive car pulled away, I leaned against the door, trembling. He had just confirmed everything I feared. This wasn't just about a loan or a cruel toast. It was about control. Ian's control over my daughter, over my family, over the legacy James had left behind. I walked back to James's office and pulled out the file I'd been building for months. Bank statements, loan documents, letters, and notes. Evidence of a pattern I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. My husband had seen what I hadn't. And now, it was time for me to open my eyes fully to the truth about my son-in-law. 3 days of silence followed. No calls from Amelia, no texts, not even angry voicemails. Just emptiness that echoed through my house like a physical presence. I spent those days methodically going through James's files, tracking the paper trail of Ian's financial maneuvers. My late husband had been meticulous with documentation, a trait Ian had clearly underestimated. On the 4th morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marcus Whitley, James's former business partner and oldest friend, standing on my porch with a cardboard box. "Christine," he said warmly, pulling me into a hug. "Been too long." I ushered him into the living room, grateful for a friendly face. "Found these when cleaning out my garage," he explained, setting the box on the coffee table. "More of James's old files. Thought you might want them." As I made coffee, Marcus studied the papers spread across my dining room table. "Working on something?" he asked carefully. I hesitated before answering. "Just trying to understand some of James's financial arrangements with Ian." Marcus's expression darkened. "Ian Sullivan. Never did trust that boy." "Why not?" I asked, setting down his coffee cup with slightly trembling hands. Marcus took a long sip before answering. "James came to me about 4 years ago, concerned about a loan he'd co-signed for Ian. Said something didn't feel right." My heart pounded. "Did he say what?" The numbers didn't add up. The business projections Ian presented were too optimistic. Borderline fantasy. James was worried Ian had misrepresented how the money would be used. I sank into a chair. "Why didn't he tell me?" Marcus's eyes softened. "He didn't want to cause problems between you and Amelia. You know how James was. Always the peacekeeper." I did know. My husband had spent his life smoothing troubled waters, fixing problems quietly, avoiding confrontation where possible. "Christine," Marcus said, leaning forward. "What's going on?" "The dam broke," I told him everything. The toast, the loan cancellation, Ian's threats, Amelia's anger. With each word, a weight lifted from my shoulders. Marcus listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded grimly. I always suspected, but this confirms it. Ian's been running a shell game. He reached for the box he'd brought, pulling out a file. About a year before James got sick, Ian approached me for investment in a guaranteed opportunity. The paperwork looked solid at first glance, but something felt off. He handed me the file. I had my accountant review it quietly. What he found wasn't pretty. I opened the file, scanning documents highlighted in yellow. Discrepancies, inconsistencies, red flags. Ian's been using the same business plan to secure funds from multiple investors, making each one think they're getting an exclusive deal, Marcus explained. Classic Ponzi scheme setup. He uses new money to show returns to earlier investors, keeping the cycle going. My stomach twisted into knots. How much do you think he's taken? Based on what I've gathered, at least $2 million, maybe more. The room seemed to spin. $2 million swindled from friends, family, business associates. And my husband's name was attached to it all. Does Amelia know? Marcus asked gently. I shook my head, thinking of my daughter's blind devotion. She thinks I'm just being difficult. She needs to know the truth, Christine. She won't believe me, I whispered. Ian has her completely convinced that I'm the fee. Problem? Marcus's weathered face hardened with resolve. Then we'll need to make the evidence impossible to ignore. We spent the afternoon building a case, comparing documents, connecting dates, following the money trail. By evening, the picture was clear and damning. Ian Sullivan had been systematically defrauding investors, using my husband's sterling reputation as a shield. Worse, he'd continued using James's name after his death, leveraging the respect my husband had earned over a lifetime. I sat back, exhausted. What do I do now? You have two options, Marcus said. Take this to the authorities or confront Ian directly. Both choices terrified me. If I went to the police, Amelia would never forgive me. If I confronted Ian, he'd find a way to twist everything. I need to think, I said finally. After Marcus left, I sat in James's office, surrounded by evidence of betrayal. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times. I picked up my phone, staring at Amelia's contact information, before I could decide whether to call. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you're doing. Stop digging or Amelia learns things about James that will destroy her memory of her father. Meet tomorrow, 2 p.m., the boathouse at Lakeside Park. Come alone. My blood ran cold. Only one person would send such a message. Ian was getting desperate. I should have been frightened. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. All these years, I'd been the polite mother-in-law, the accommodating one, the one who kept the peace at any cost. Not anymore. I texted back a single word. No. Then I called Marcus. I've made my decision, I said when he answered. I'm confronting Ian, but I'm doing it my way. Christine, be careful. Men like Ian get dangerous when cornered. I know, I replied, thinking of the threats, the manipulation, the years of subtle cruelty. But I'm through being silent. After we hung up, I gathered the most damning evidence into a folder. Then I called Amelia. We need to talk, I said when she answered, her voice still cold. About Ian, about the truth. There's nothing to discuss, she replied stiffly. Amelia, I said, my voice stronger than I'd felt in years. You can choose not to listen to me, but if you do, I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life. The silence on the other end stretched until I thought she might have hung up. Finally, she spoke, her voice small and uncertain. When? Tomorrow. Noon. My house. As I set down the phone, I realized my hands weren't trembling anymore. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. Morning arrived with a thunderstorm that seemed fitting for the day ahead. I moved through my house preparing, brewing coffee, arranging files on the dining room table, rehearsing what I would say to Amelia. At 11:30, my doorbell rang. 30 minutes early. Typical Amelia. Punctuality was a value James had instilled in her from childhood. But when I opened the door, it wasn't my daughter standing there. Mrs. Thornton. A woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bob extended her hand. "I'm Meredith Gaines, former business partner of your son-in-law." I studied her face, noting the tension around her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. "I don't recall Ian mentioning you," I said cautiously. A humorless smile crossed her face. "I'm sure he wouldn't. May I come in? It's about to pour." Lightning flashed behind her, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder. I stepped aside, allowing her into my foyer. "I'm expecting my daughter," I explained, leading her to the living room. "She'll be here soon." "Good," Meredith said, setting her briefcase on the coffee table. "She should hear this too." Something in her tone, a mixture of determination and resignation, made me pause. "Hear what exactly?" Meredith unclasped her briefcase, removing a folder much like the ones now spread across my dining room. 3 years ago, Ian Sullivan and I were partners in Meridian Consulting. We specialized in turnaround strategies for struggling businesses. She handed me the folder, until I discovered he was embezzling from our clients. My stomach dropped. I opened the folder to find documentation of transfers, irregularities, discrepancies, all pointing to systematic fraud. I confronted him, Meredith continued, her voice flat. The next day, our biggest clients received evidence that I had been stealing from them. Forged documents, doctored emails, fake bank statements, all perfectly crafted to make me look guilty. She unbuttoned her sleeve, rolling it up to reveal a long scar on her forearm. I crashed my car that night. The investigation cleared me eventually, but by then, my reputation was destroyed. No one would hire me. Ian walked away with our client base and my share of the business. Rain began to pound against the windows, the storm intensifying as if responding to the tension in the room. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Meredith's eyes met mine. "Because yesterday, a former colleague called to warn me that someone's been asking questions about the Meredith Gaines situation. Damage control, getting ahead of the story. That's Ian's pattern when he feels threatened." I closed the folder, setting it beside my own collection of evidence. "And you think I'm the threat?" She nodded. "I heard about the loan. Once Ian realizes he can't intimidate you, he'll try to discredit you. I wanted you to be prepared." The doorbell rang again. This time, I knew it would be Amelia. "Wait here," I told Meredith, my mind racing. I opened the door to find my daughter standing under an umbrella, her expression guarded. She stepped inside, shaking off raindrops. "Mom," she said stiffly, then noticed the stranger in my living room. "Who's this?" Before I could answer, Meredith stood. "I'm someone who knows exactly what your husband is capable of." Amelia's face hardened. "If you've brought me here for some kind of ambush, please," I interrupted. "Just listen, for 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Something in my voice, desperation perhaps, or a mother's authority that never quite fades, made her pause. 5 minutes, she agreed reluctantly. I led her to the dining room, where the evidence of Ian's deception lay spread across the table. Meredith followed, her folder in hand. For the next 30 minutes, we laid out the case against Ian. The misappropriated funds, the manipulated documents, the pattern of fraud that stretched back years. Meredith's story, Marcus's findings, James's concerns. Amelia sat motionless, her face a mask as we spoke. Only her hands betrayed her turmoil, twisting a tissue into shreds. When we finished, silence fell, broken only by the steady drumming of rain against the windows. "Say something," I finally whispered. Amelia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. If what you're saying is true, my entire marriage has been a lie. Not your marriage, I said gently. Just Ian. It's the same thing, she snapped, standing, suddenly. 12 years, Mom. 12 years of my life with a man who… She stopped, unable to continue. I'm sorry, I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away, pacing the room. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Being right about him all along? The accusation stung. How can you think that? Amelia, this breaks my heart. Then why did you do it? She demanded. Why did you start digging? Because of what he said at his birthday dinner, I admitted. Not the toast itself, but what it represented. The years of subtle cruelty, the way he systematically pushed me out of your life. Amelia stopped pacing, her back to me. I thought you were just being sensitive. I know. She turned, her expression conflicted. What am I supposed to do with this information? The question hung in the air. What was she supposed to do? Leave her husband? Report him to authorities? Pretend she never learned the truth? That's your decision, I said finally. I just couldn't let you continue in ignorance. Meredith, who had remained silent throughout our exchange, spoke up. Ms. Sullivan, your husband destroyed my life because I threatened to expose him. He will do the same to anyone who stands in his way, including your mother. Amelia flinched at the stark assessment. I need time to think, she said, gathering her purse. I can't just… This is too much. I nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. As she reached the door, she paused. Did Dad know? About Ian? I hesitated, then decided my daughter deserved the complete truth. He suspected. It's why he was trying to distance himself from Ian's business ventures before he died. A tear slipped down Amelia's cheek. I should have listened to him. To you. After she left, Meredith gathered her documents. What happens now? I asked her. She shrugged, her expression grim. That depends on Ian. Men like him don't surrender their power easily. I'm not afraid of him, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. Meredith studied me. Maybe you should be. But then again, she added with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her, maybe he should be afraid of you. After she left, I sat alone in my quiet house, listening to the storm gradually subside. I had done what I needed to do, revealed the truth, protected my daughter as best I could. But the cost of that truth remained to be seen. My phone buzzed with a text from Ian. You've made a serious mistake. I didn't bother responding. The time for threats and intimidation was over. The time for silence had ended. 2 days passed without word from Amelia. I tried to carry on with my normal routine, gardening in the morning, reading in the afternoon, preparing simple meals for one. But every phone call, every car passing by my house made my heart leap with anticipation or dread. On the third evening, as I was washing dinner dishes, headlights swept across my kitchen window. I peered out to see Amelia's car pulling into my driveway. She wasn't alone. Ian sat in the passenger seat. My hands gripped the edge of the sink. This wasn't what I had expected. The doorbell rang. I dried my hands slowly, steeling myself. When I opened the door, Amelia stood on the porch. Ian, slightly behind her. Mom, she said, her voice carefully controlled. We need to talk. All of us. I nodded, stepping aside to let them in. Ian's face wore an expression I'd never seen before. Not the usual smug confidence or practiced charm, but something tighter, more forced. Christine, he said with a small nod. Thank you for seeing us. We moved to the living room. I took my usual armchair while Amelia and Ian sat on the sofa, a careful distance between them. The tension in the room was palpable. Amelia shared with, Me what you and that woman, Meredith, told her. Ian began, his tone measured. I want to clear the air. By all means, I replied, folding my hands in my lap. Ian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Business is complicated, especially consulting. There are always disgruntled partners, clients who misunderstand the process. Meredith Gaines is a vindictive woman who couldn't handle the pressure and tried to blame me for her failures. I watched Amelia's face as he spoke. Her expression remained unreadable. And the financial irregularities? I asked. The misappropriated funds? The forged documents? Ian smiled thinly. Misunderstandings. Accounting practices that look suspicious to outsiders but are standard in the industry. Marcus Whitley is living in the past. What worked in James's era isn't how business operates today. Is that so? I reached for the folder I'd prepared, sitting ready on the side table. These bank transfers from client accounts to your personal offshore account? That's standard practice? Ian's smile faltered. You don't understand the context. The forged signatures on these documents, just industry standards? I continued, pulling out page after page. The loan application that lists collateral James never owned? The falsified profit projections? Are these all just misunderstandings too? Color drained from Ian's face. Beside him, Amelia stared at the documents, her eyes widening. Where did you get those? Ian demanded. James kept copies of everything, I said. He didn't trust you, Ian. He just didn't want to hurt Amelia by saying so. This is ridiculous, Ian scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. These are obviously doctored. You're trying to drive a wedge between me and my wife. No, came Amelia's quiet voice. She's telling the truth. Ian turned to her, startled. What? Amelia's hands trembled slightly, but her gaze was steady. I recognized Dad's signature, right away, except on these documents dated 2 months after he died. She looked at Ian, her eyes filling with tears. How could you? Amelia, sweetheart, this is crazy. Stop lying, she snapped, her voice cracking. I called Marcus yesterday. Then I spoke to 3 of your former clients. They confirmed everything. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Ian's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. You went behind my back? He demanded, anger replacing his practiced calm. Like you went behind mine for years? Amelia shot back. Like you used my father's name after he died? Like you threatened my mother? Ian stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Yes, I said firmly. You do. For once in your life, Ian Sullivan, you will sit and listen to the truth. Something in my tone, perhaps the absolute certainty that I was no longer afraid of him, made him sink back onto the sofa. Let me tell you what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady. You're going to sign a confession detailing every fraudulent transaction, every misappropriated dollar, every lie you've told. You're going to make financial restitution to everyone you've harmed, starting with Meredith Gaines. Ian laughed bitterly. Or what? You'll go to the police, drag your daughter's name through a public scandal, destroy what's left of James's legacy? If necessary, yes, I said simply. Mom wouldn't have to, Amelia interjected. I would. Ian stared at her, disbelief etched on his face. You'd turn in your own husband? The man I married doesn't exist, she said, her voice breaking. He never did. The silence that followed was deafening. Ian's gaze darted between us, calculating, searching for an escape. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, I said, standing to signal the end of our discussion. Confession and restitution, or we take everything to the authorities. This isn't over, Ian hissed as he rose. Yes, Amelia said, remaining seated. It is. She twisted her wedding ring off her finger and set it on the coffee table. I won't be coming home tonight. The look that crossed Ian's face was unlike anything I'd seen before. Rage, disbelief, and underneath it all, the dawning realization that he had finally lost control. He stormed out without another word, the front door slamming behind him. The sound echoed through the house like a final punctuation mark. Amelia sat motionless, staring at her bare ring finger. I moved to the sofa, taking the space beside her. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She looked up, her eyes red but remarkably clear. "Don't be. You tried to warn me. Dad tried to warn me. I just couldn't see it." I took her hand in mine, noting how small it still felt, just like when she was a little girl coming to me with scraped knees or broken toys. "What happens now?" she asked softly. I squeezed her hand. "Now we face whatever comes next. Together." Outside, I heard Ian's car roar to life, tires screeching as he pulled away. The storm wasn't over yet, but for the first time in years I wasn't afraid of the thunder. 6 months can change everything. The maple tree in my front yard, barren during that confrontation with Ian, now blazed with autumn colors. The garden I'd neglected while consumed with uncovering his deceptions had flourished over the summer and was now yielding its final harvest. And my relationship with Amelia had been reborn, stronger than before. Ian, true to character, had refused our terms. Instead, he'd emptied their joint accounts and disappeared overnight, but not before sending a scathing email to family and friends, painting himself as the victim of a vindictive mother-in-law and an ungrateful wife. Few believed him. I was in the kitchen slicing apples for a pie when Amelia arrived, letting herself in with the key I'd given her after she moved into her own apartment. "Mom?" she called, the sound of her briefcase landing on the hallway table following her voice. "In here," I answered, smiling as she appeared in the doorway. At 39, my daughter had always been beautiful, but these past months had added something new, a quiet confidence, a certainty that had been missing during her years with Ian. "Smells amazing in here," she said, stealing an apple slice. "Court went well, by the way." I paused, knife hovering over the cutting board. "The divorce is final?" She nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing her face. Relief, sadness, determination. "Officially as of 2 hours ago." I set down the knife and embraced her. "How do you feel?" "Free," she said after a moment. "Sad about the years wasted, but mostly free." She moved to the cabinet, retrieving plates for dinner with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged. Since Ian's departure, she'd been coming. Over 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes we talked about what had happened, sometimes we didn't. Healing happened in its own time. "Marcus called," she said, setting the table. "The authorities have traced Ian to Mexico. They're working with officials there to bring him back." I nodded, unsurprised. Ian had always talked about retiring to a beachfront property south of the border. Even in flight, he was predictable. "The forensic accountants finished their review," Amelia continued. "They've identified most of the victims. Restitution proceedings will start once he's extradited." "How many people did he defraud?" I asked, placing the pie in the oven. 27, she said quietly. "Including Dad." The number hung between us, a reminder of the scope of Ian's deception and the lives he'd damaged. "And Meredith?" I asked. "She's been cleared completely. The investigation confirmed that Ian fabricated everything against her." Amelia smiled slightly. "She's starting a new consulting firm, asked if I'd be interested in joining once I finish my MBA. I raised an eyebrow. "Are you?" "Maybe. It feels right somehow. Using what I've learned from this whole mess to help others." We moved to the dining room, settling into our usual seats for dinner. The conversation flowed easily between us, punctuated by comfortable silences, the kind that only exist between people who truly understand each other. After dinner, we sat in the living room with cups of tea and slices of warm apple pie. The setting sun cast long shadows across the floor. "I've been thinking," Amelia said, setting down her cup. About that night at Ian's birthday dinner. I tensed slightly. We hadn't spoken much about that evening. The toast that had set everything in motion. If he hadn't said that, if he hadn't humiliated you publicly, would you still have canceled the loan? Would any of this have come to light? I considered the question carefully. I think it would have, eventually. The loan was just one thread in a tapestry of deception. Pull one thread, the whole thing unravels. But it might have taken longer, she pressed. I might have remained blind to who he really was. Perhaps, I admitted. Or perhaps something else would have triggered the revelation. We'll never know. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mom, for not seeing it sooner, for not believing you. I reached across the space between us, taking her hand. You have nothing to apologize for. Ian was manipulative and convincing. He fooled a lot of people. Not you, she said, with a small smile. You always saw through him. Mother's intuition, I replied lightly, though we both knew it was more than that. It was years of watching, observing, noticing the small inconsistencies that others missed. Later, as we stood on the porch saying goodnight, Amelia hugged me tightly. I've been offered a position at Berkeley, she said, teaching business ethics. Ironically enough, I'm thinking of taking it. California is a long way from Connecticut, I observed, though I was careful to keep any disappointment from my voice. That's the thing, she said, pulling back to look at me. I was hoping you might. Consider coming with me. There's a beautiful little house for sale just 10 minutes from campus. Perfect garden space, great natural light for your painting. I blinked, surprised. You want me to move across the country with you? Only if you want to, she said quickly. It's just, we've lost so much time, Mom. Years when Ian was deliberately keeping us apart. I don't want to lose any more. Emotion welled up in my throat. I'd have to think about it. This house is full of memories, I know, she finished gently. But maybe it's time for new ones. Just promise you'll consider it? I nodded, unable to speak. After she drove away, I walked through my empty house, touching familiar surfaces, looking at photographs, remembering. This had been home for 43 years. James and I had raised Amelia here. I'd mourned him here. It held the story of my life within its walls. But perhaps Amelia was right. Perhaps it was time for new stories, new beginnings. In my bedroom, I opened the small jewelry box on my dresser and removed a faded photograph, James and me on our wedding day, young and full of hope. I traced his face with my finger. What do you think? I whispered to the silent room. California? No answer came, of course, but somehow I knew he would approve. James had always believed in moving forward, in embracing change, in finding joy wherever possible. The next morning, I called a real estate agent. Later that week, when Amelia came for dinner, I handed her a small gift box as we sat down to eat. What's this? She asked, opening it curiously. Inside lay a small brass key. For your spare room in California, I said, smiling as realization dawned on her face. I'll need somewhere to stay until I find my own place. Her joyful laughter filled the dining room, the sound I'd missed for so many years while Ian's influence had shadowed our relationship. As we raised our glasses in a toast, not to the past but to the future we would build together, I thought about silence. The silence I'd maintained for years to keep peace. The silence that had allowed Ian's deceptions to flourish. The silence that had nearly cost me my daughter. But silence could also heal. In the quiet moments between words, in the peaceful spaces we now shared, Amelia and I were rebuilding what had been broken. Sometimes the strongest statement is made without words at all. My silence at Ian's cruel toast had not been weakness. It had been the first step toward reclaiming my power, my voice, my family. And in that reclamation, I had found something I thought was lost forever. Home.